slacking. Shiur slacking.
He decided because she's so good. Decided because she's so good.
How are you, Moshe? You okay?
Yeah, Baruch Hashem.
All right?
Huh?
You fast all right?
Moshe, thanks for planning so quickly. We'll be going down anyway. See you then soon.
You can do.
I don't know why was
It makes sense.
They do appreciate the verbal.
Why didn't we have a share?
They remember after.
Well, last night we did 6 o'clock.
Was before.
Well,
It's easy for them, they know look after the kids.
Ah.
They're not
I
thinking
didn't
about
realise it was not 8 o'clock.
We discussed it. We discussed when's a good time.
how old are you?
Yeah, we should have done
So that 7, 8 people last night wasn't bad.
7, 8 very good.
I think
last night it was 6.
6, 7. How well it was then? Were you here?
Oh, 7, 8 people, but last night it was 6.
Ah.
7, 8.
I was trying to work out which is it being recorded? Is everything is it being
On YouTube.
and it's being recorded as well?
Yes. There's a recording.
Yeah, it does. Just me. I can smile myself for once.
You missed quite a lot. Technical yesterday, I saw the pictures.
Yeah. Oh, today we've got some more pictures.
Every time.
I know we're not technical.
Oh, you've got more pictures today, right?
Good job. We might soon be in the garden.
I know, but there was 6 people.
Including services.
Who's speaking?
Yeah, he's giving a Josh a site
About what?
About Shiur,
about all the rules and how
What time?
he's going to give a message here to all the goyim or keeper, everyone who isn't keeping the rules.
What time is he giving it?
No one.
So we don't need to listen because we're so active.
No one's going to listen to it.
I listen to
What
what's
time?
legal. If it's not legal,
There's not-
My brother's getting married week after Sukkot. And he's very upset about Sukkot himself. Yeah,
it's
so.
legal max.
I see where you really stand.
Depends how big the family is.
What?
You can combine it with a Levaya, Goish one.
Or you can get married.
And you're allowed 45.
To a goyish,
They're allowed 30. Or get married to.
To find somebody to kill quick.
to a dead goy.
Very good.
Where's Johnson speaking?
Parliament.
Like any specific website?
No, we'll be on radio, I'm sure.
Yesterday.
Okay, what's that then here with Aleph?
8.5 now.
Oh, very good. Mishnah says that somebody goes out for good reason, he's allowed to come back all the way to his place. Where do you want to prefer to sit, Yoda? He's happy there, Says even if it's a long way, even if it's more than 2,000 amos, the Mishnah starts off, if you go out, let's say, Kiddush HaChodesh, etc., you're allowed to, min hadin, about 4 amos. And Gamnil was the second allowed 2,000, but only 2,000. Then the Mishnah finishes off, if you go out, you can come home. Come home, it sounds like you can come home, however far it is. Omar Yehuda, Omar Rav, it doesn't mean you're allowed to go as far as you want. It means you're allowed to carry the weapons home with you. You shouldn't say, well, I had a reason to go with weapons, but now on the way back I should leave my weapons below. No, you're allowed to carry the weapons. So there's 2 different problems over here. One is walking out of the tchum, and the second one is carrying weapons. And the Mishnah over here is coming to permit carrying weapons. Furthermore, my question. What was the question start off with? Why? Because the Reisha was talking about Kiddush HaChodesh, and the Sefer is talking about saving somebody from danger. Maybe when you do Kiddush HaChodesh, when you're allowed to go 2,000, you're allowed to go out the Tchum. But when you save somebody from danger, which is a much bigger need, maybe there Chazal permitted you to come all the way home. Eloi Kasha or Kashmir says the question which Rabbi Yehuda answered was a different question. It's the same question, but from a different source. From our Mishnah, it's not a Kasha. Why? Because our Mishnah doesn't say anything. Our Mishnah just says that when you go to do Kiddush HaChodesh, you're allowed to go out the Tchum. And when you go to save somebody, you're allowed to go home. And you could differentiate between Kiddush HaChodesh and saving somebody. But this is a question. But we showed in the beginning of when people do Kiddush HaChodesh, they would. He did what? Why are you doing? Oh, he did it. Rosh Hashanah. Oh, very good. In the beginning, they never moved all day long. His king of Zakin, Shiur Alpayim Amo L'Chol Ruach, they're allowed to have 2,000 amos in any direction.
So Tchumen, also Tchumen is
Right, yes. It's only double. Not only those, Ela Afilu Chachamo, Haboleleit, a midwife come to help give birth, Avol Hatzim, and a guys comes to say from the army, from a river, like a sweeping river, when our poilers from a wall falling down in that lake from a fire. I can show you, Yeshem Alpayim Amo L'Chol Ruach, they're allowed to go 2,000 amos. No more than that. Now here it says clearly saving somebody from an army, guys. While he said, "Kol hayotzin lahatzil choizim imkimon can come on afilu tova." While Yodam Arav shechoizim ekleizayin imkimon allowed to go home with a weapon. Did a bit of research a little bit. I once spoke about it. Unfortunately, I've forgotten. I lost my notes, forgotten the topic. Which I got fascinating shuvo is that this whole sugya is a svah of hitu seifon shum tchiloson. That means if we don't allow people to go home, they will next time not bother going out. If I say to a doctor, you came to save somebody's life, right? Call out that Solomon, he goes out to the middle of Peak District, somebody's not well, right? For the rest of Shabbos, you have to spend with him 4 hours. Next time, he won't come. Now, from this Gemara, it is mashma that the heta is very, very limited. Because if you look carefully, the Gemara over here says that we're allowing to go out of the tchum, which is the Issa D'Rabbanan, and we're allowing you to carry the weapons home, which the Gemara explained in a moment was because there was another danger of not taking the weapons home. It is mashma the other Isur D'Rabbanan or Isur D'Oraisa, they did not permit. And therefore, if a doctor is stuck outside, now if you need the doctor again, when she talks about, for example, let's say he takes with him, he talks about an oxygen tank, so then you need the oxygen tank back in town, so that there's no shaila. The question is when it's not necessary. Somebody, for example, happened to be caught up. What? Was knife. That's certainly not needed. But okay, even less. Let's say a person, for example, is called out to somebody. No, it's not necessary. It's not going to be needed.
It's to do with the guy not coming again.
Oh,
maybe he'll be upset with him.
That's what the mission of Rosh Hashanah said.
Very good. But that heta is only being used to be matted to Rabbanon. And Mishum Zamdak Shlomo and Shuvas. No, he thought, well, for example, had to drive out to help something. Now he needs to drive back up. So Minchas Shlomo Taka is very, very machmir, and he says you're only allowed to do Isur D'Rabbanan. When Moshe though in Shuvah says over here that they don't have a lot of Islam, but that they do have is the Mishvanshens and Chelik Dalet and V'Chaim Simon Pei, Hol Avichos, even Isur D'Oraisa is permitted. And what he says is like this: he says that at the end of the day, the fact is, if we don't allow these Isur D'Oraisa, then what will happen is people will not bother next time. And therefore it is actually Pikuach Nefesh. So it's a very big arichus. The Orchos Shabbos and Chilek Gimel Simon Hey has got a big arichus. And basically he says like this, he passes halacha l'maisa. If somebody is not going to go again, therefore we're allowed to do, and also in any case where there could easily be a need for him that time, so then it's permitted. But in a case where a person's truly not in that situation, a person, for example, is the guy Yehuda Steinberg, and he's been stuck on a mission, etc., then he should spend the Shabbos in his place. He shouldn't move. If a person, because the head of his was only Gabi Tchumen, but not Gabi like going in the car and other things, unless there's a danger in the place that the person's in. The person's in a dangerous situation, so then he's got other hetem. So the more now explains why was it that the weapons were permitted. Kedetanya. But we showed in the beginning, they would leave the weapons in the nearest house. The enemies recognized they chased after them. So they quickly went back to get the weapons. They didn't push each other. Kaisel unfortunately killed each other more than the enemies killed in their urgency and pushing to try and get weapons. They made the heta that you're allowed to go back with your weapon. So 2 hetem said. One is allowed to go out the tchum, and another you're allowed to carry a weapon. It's not a steer. When Kaisel win, then you're only allowed to go 2,000 amos and no more. When the goyim won themselves, what's mean they won themselves? They beat themselves. It's a euphemism. When the goyim won the Eden, but we don't want to ever say a negative story. So when we say when the goyim beat, we don't say Kaisel, when they beat up themselves, meaning when they beat up Klal Yisrael, so then Klal Yisrael are in danger, then they're allowed to go all the way home. So the Gemara now, and the Ma'aseh, the Mishnah Vur paskins both of these answers lekula. It means either one of these. It means either situation it is mutter. Either in a time when the Goyim are victorious, then you're allowed to go however far you want because that's the secretary of the Gemara. Or if the Goyim were not victorious and you've got weapons with you, you're allowed to carry the weapons all the way back home, because if you leave your weapons somewhere, and then afterwards you'll need them again, in the rush to get them, you might cause yourself harm. So therefore, the Mishnah passes both of these answers. Well, again, let's go summarize. When a person goes for a midwife or something like that, the Mishnah says only 2,000 amos, no more. Person goes to save someone, we have a steerer. Our Mishnah says he's allowed to go as far as he wants. The Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah says 2,000 amos. We have two teruts. Teretz number one is that our Mishnah is not talking about walking, it's talking about carrying the weapons. The Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah is talking about walking. Teretz number two is our Mishnah is talking about when they're going one, and therefore you need to go much further to escape them. Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah is talking about when the Yidden one. Mishnah Vur passes both of these terutzim and both the kula. So either teretz is good. It means either if they're going win or a person who carries weapons is allowed to go as far as he needs to put the weapons in a safe place to get home safe. Now the world discusses when do we go to war on Goyim on the Shabbos. You saw the Goyim that went to lay siege on a Jewish town. We don't go with weapons. Now meds if they only come for money. Our ball is in the foshes. If they come for iskin the foshes, you can go with weapons. And you can even mechal Shabbos. So the Brisa differentiates as follows: if Goyim are coming to attack you for money, give them the money and don't be mechal Shabbos. If they're coming to attack you for chas v'shalom, for sekonos nefashos, then you're allowed to be mechal Shabbos to defend yourself. What? Oh, we'll see in a minute. Yeah, okay. The chiddush is more by the money. A town which is near the border. Even if it only came for money, even if they come for the most mundane things, all they want is to take some straw off us. Oh, this is something which again Moshe brings. Just see what the Gemara says first. That means the Gemara says like this: if they come just for straw, you're not allowed to mechal Shabbos, except if you're the first town on the border. Why? What's the svoi for the first on the border? No, the Rashi says we also supposed to mumarich that what happens is if they win the first town, they feel successful. Once they feel successful, then they can then come on to come to worse things and worse things. It means success breeds success, and therefore, since they've already been successful getting up the town, they'll therefore spread, they'll cause danger. And Moshe says that, like you pointed out, that the Rashi tells us that first, whenever a person comes to steal money, often it leads to the neskanos nefashos. So therefore, he says, Lamoshe, if a gatherer breaks into your house on Shabbos, you're allowed to be mechal on Shabbos to call the police. Why? Because it can cause danger. Unless a person is 100% sure that it won't, right? The person's got to think. But otherwise, a person, why last Chash, all the Moses are only coming for money. It says that once they have success and they know, especially, he says like this, that nowadays the Goyim are very aware of the halachas of the Yidden. If they know that Yidden are not going to be mechal Shabbos, because when they come on Shabbos, they'll come on Shabbos and they can come to dangerous things. So therefore, you have to be extra careful about such a thing. So why shouldn't happen that if a Galam does come out of Shabbos. Bovel is like the border town. The Turgumu Nahador. Nahador was on the border, and therefore, if they were attacked, you were allowed to mechal Shabbos. Now the Gemara brings a pasuk which has a slight relevance to this story. Dorash of the story to be baby Ma'idich Siva Yigidu LeDavid Demo. They told David as follows: Hine Plashtim Nelchami BeKeila. The Plishtim have come to fight in Keila. They are attacking, pillaging the barns. Now, when they're pillaging the barns, is that for money or for life?
Money.
Oh, because money. Tana Keila Yasmuch so it was at the border. They only came for straw. The pasuk says, "Vayisha David ba'Hashem neimo elech v'kisv v'plishtim ha'ila v'mashem David lech v'kisv v'plishtim." Go and destroy the Plishtim. David asked Hashem, should he? And Hashem said yes. And you'll save kilo. What was the question? If the question was, are you allowed to mechal Shabbos for money when it's a border town, high basin of Shmuel Mosikaim? Why did he go to basin of Shmuel? Why did you have to ask Hashem? Why did you have to use the Urim V'Tumim? Hello, imatzlach, he wants to know whether it would be successful or not. Because what was the reply? And you'll be victorious, you'll save them. Shema mino is a vayam. The ikad over here was that there would be success. And the question was whether it would be successful or not. It's halacha, we don't ask the Urim V'Tumim. Halacha, you have to ask the Beis Din. The real question you have to ask is whether, that means it was asking Hashem, will I be successful or not? And therefore Tesis says, this is the second Tesis, therefore this really doesn't have to do with our Gemara. It doesn't even have to do with Shabbos. Because the question wasn't a Chilul Shabbos question. It was just a question whether they were allowed to go and fight. So what was the Gemara's relevance? If that's the case. Yeah, but why mention it to you? The question of David HaMelech was only, will he win or not? Which was a question he wanted to know before he was going to war, will he win?
Because maybe he's not going to win.
You never know if you're going to win.
No, so that's why David HaMelech wanted to know. So this says, because over here it says Nilchomim, calls it a Milchama, calls it a war. Now, really, they were only coming for food, coming for barns. And the Pasuk describes it as a battle, as a war. War is always a life and death question. So you see over here that even when they're coming just for financial issues, when it's the border, when they're starting the whole battle, it can lead on to worse things. And therefore, it's considered a war even, and you're allowed to miss food. I didn't catch that. What? Right. That's a slightly different sword. That's the Rashi's sword, that when the person comes to steal something. Here the Gemara is saying that once they came for food, it evolves into a battle. And a battle is a dangerous situation. Okay. So that's the end of that sugya regarding how far a person is allowed to walk. And that can sometimes come up when a person needs to know to travel after a story or before a story, how far a person has to go. The halacha is that if a person comes into a town, we'll see in a later Mishnah, that let's say he wants to be koine shvisa. Let's say, for example, you're coming to you got a holiday house and you're coming to Friday afternoon, you realize you're quite far off. But you remember there's a signpost which says the name of the village or something. You know what the signpost is. So what you could do is you can say that signpost will be my place for Shabbos. And then you can walk 2,000 amas from that signpost. But for that, you don't need to eat food. You just have to make a decision. We'll see. We should discuss it at all. That's a special head they gave for those coming on the walk, etc. And what happened over here was the person was walking to town, but he did not know that he was already in town. It means he did not know he was within the 2,000 amas. So the question is, can he be koine shvisa in the town, or is he koine shvisa where he is at the moment? So Mishi Yoshev B'derech, a person was sitting on a journey to rest, and then became nacht, and then v'omad v'vo has a samach, and then suddenly he realizes he's actually next to the city. He can't consider the city to be his tchum, and only he's allowed 2,000 amas. That means he's allowed to go in the city. This lo yikonis, the Ritva says, doesn't mean literally he can't go to the city. It means he can't make the city as his point of reference. Meaning he's allowed to walk 2,000 amas from where he was when the Shabbos came in. If 2,000 amas gets him into the city, so he'll be able to walk halfway into the city, however far he can go. But he can't say that the city was my Eruv since he did not know that he was by the city. This is allowed to. Tafin came into the city. He didn't even know. And therefore, nevertheless, since he was in the city's confines, it was within 2,000 amas of the city. So therefore, we say now that the city is his point of reference, because obviously that's where a person would want to be. A person would want to be in the middle of the countryside. So therefore, we assume that's his decision, and therefore the town became his starting point. He was walking on the journey on Friday. It became dark, and he slept outside the city. The Shabbos morning, some shepherds, cattle shepherds, saw him. The city is right next to you. He come in. He spent the entire day teaching Torah, even though he had slept in the night. out in the wild, and he had just found out that he's coming to town. That didn't put him off going to learn. He spent the entire day giving a drasha. So we see over here what? That the city is his point of reference, not like Rameh that says you can't. Is that a raya? Two answers you can push away. Maybe he actually knew, and they never were realized. They didn't know that he knew. He was just tired. He went to bed, but he actually already knew that he was next to the town, and therefore he had already made the decision to be kind of shvisa, to acquire residence in the town.
He said he probably wouldn't have slept well in the wild, wouldn't he?
Yeah. Maybe it was that. The base of Medrash was already inside his tchum. Since it was already inside his tchum, so therefore it wasn't as if the city was his point of reference. Rather, so here they've actually got a picture. Reish Nun Beis. I like the picture. Because I should have warned you earlier. I should tell you. The next actually 1, 2, 3, 4. Reish Nun Beis onwards till Reish Nun Zayin. We're all going to be today. Yeah, we do Reish Nun Beis first because I'm going to discuss Reish Nun Beis. The next ones come later. All the next ones come up later. So what's Reish Nun Beis? If you look at it, you've got a square which will tell me when it's up, please.
You wanted to
all the way to Reish Nun Zayin.
Yeah,
right. So the Tarfon sat in that box. If you got it, you haven't got it. Because he sat in this box. So what happened was, he then walked to Beis Medrash and darshaned. But you've got no raya that the town is his point of reference. Why not? Because the 2,000 amas gets into the Beis Medrash. But you don't know if you would have then, let's say, walked 2,000 amas in a different direction, etc. So either he was aware that he's near a town and he was going to shvisa in the town, or the Beis Medrash was within 2,000 amas, if he can't prove it. Next Mishnah. A very, very similar question, but here's slightly different. What happened was, a person when Shabbos comes in is koine shvisa. That means that's the place of his residence, is allowed 2,000 in direction. We actually once mentioned this. What would you say the halacha is if he's fast asleep when Shabbos came in? And he did not know that Shabbos was coming in.
And what had he done? He'd done nothing.
He'd done nothing to be koine shvisa. So it's middle of the countryside.
Does the sleeping give him?
So with the fact that he's not conscious, can you be koine shvisa without being aware? Can you be koine shvisa without being aware? Oh, it's machlokas is shayes.
How do you know?
He says machlokas.
4x4 was my thought.
It's machlokas. Somebody once wrote a letter, an interesting letter in Kana Degusa. So he said to the stipend, I don't understand every question I come to in Gemara. Machlokas. He wrote quite chutzpahdik. So the stipend wrote back that generally I don't reply to those who write for the lack of comment. But with you, I felt necessity because I'm scared that you'll think. And he said a very interesting point. He says the Gemara doesn't need to tell us all the halachas which are obvious to mutter and all the halachas which are obvious to asa. It only needs to tell you the halachas which are in between. So therefore, those halachas, indeed, it's likely to be machlokas. And he compares it a little bit to when you draw a map of where the sea border is to the land. So you don't draw where all the sea is, all the land is. You just make one line. Now that line is not always so accurate. You've got sometimes the tide goes in, it goes out. Now why didn't it just draw you all the sea, which you definitely, and all the land, which definitely, and leave out the area? The answer that we don't need to know. The sea we know, the land we know. We only want to know the area between where the sea and the land is. So the same thing by Heta and Issa. All that which is mutter obvious we know. All that which is asa obvious we know. It's only the in-between case. And that's what the Mishnah is going to talk about. Everything else is obvious. What?
Where did we know from?
Because you can be medayek. Once you know that's a machloi, because everything less than that is mutter, everything more than that. It doesn't know. He says it gets 2,000 amas in any direction. And he gets 4 amas. And means he only has 4 amas the whole Shabbos. He's in the middle. That's picture Reish Nun Gimel. He's only allowed to walk 2 amas in any direction. It's a very small area. Now, comes along Rabbi Yehuda and he argues. No, the first time Rabbi Yehuda says 2,000 amas.
Can you do the shtick for finding a food?
Yes, he will be allowed to this shtick. But only if it comes to won't help him. But here won't help because he's got no tchum anywhere. He's got no tchum anywhere at all. He's stuck for the whole Shabbos. He gets into a city, still won't help him because if you get into a city when you go out of the tchum, it won't help him. Won't help him. Okay. Now Rabbi Yehuda argues. I want to try. If you look at the picture, Rabbi Yehuda agrees with Rabbi Lezer. Whenever we say 4 by 4, there are two ways to understand 4 by 4. 4 in every direction, which gives you 8 by 8, which is a big area, or 2 by 2. Here we're being machmir that it's 2 by 2. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda says, I agree with you that it's 2 by 2, but rather it's not. He's given an entire square of 4 by 4, but he can choose in which direction the square should be. So if he's standing in the middle of here, so you said he's allowed 2, 2, 2, 2. Not necessarily. He can choose to go 4 that way, but then nothing at all that way. That means Rabbi Yehuda is not arguing Rabbi Lezer in the area and the amount that he is given. The amount is given exactly the same, 4 by 4, 2 in each direction, according to Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Yehuda just says he's allowed to choose if he prefers to go 4 in that direction and not in that direction. He's not giving him more area. He's just giving him the choice which area to take. So Rabbi Yehuda direction for 4 hours. That if he chose one direction, but he can't then walk in any other direction. So they both agree you get 4 by 4. The only question is, according to Rabbi Lezer, you only get 2 by 2 in each direction. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you get 4, but you can choose which way to go 4. But once you go 4, you can't go anywhere else. You only get 4. The Maisa, who do we pass like just that you should know for the reference? No. You get 2,000 amps. Oh, now the Mishnah gets very technical and goes to a few different cases where you have a few people where, according to the Chachamim, they only have a small area. Why do they only have a small area? Because each one fell asleep and they all woke up and then suddenly they realized it's Shabbos. So now you can have a situation where different people are all very close to each other, unless you've got Reuven and Shimon, where the border is permitted for both, so they're allowed to eat together. So look at the picture, for example, Reish Nun Dalet. I'll show you a picture. Reish Nun Dalet is a nice, sweet picture. You can see a still person. That's where they were when Shabbos came in. And then they sit down to eat. What's the chiddush that they can sit down and eat in such a case, in Reish Nun Dalet? What? No, it's not because of Muvlois. Not because of Muvlois. Why are they allowed to? What's the chiddush? Yeah, so what? Okay, they're eating within the 2 hours. Can you see the picture? What's the chiddush they're allowed to eat together on that table? No, the chiddush is that they don't pass across the table to each other because each one's only got 2 amas. So the chiddush is that even though each one's only got 2 amas till the direction, you can still eat together. Oh, yeah, I'm not sure why his arm is out, but the point, something like that. Yeah, you're right. That he can't bring it in. He can't bring it into the table. Yes, it has to be socially distanced. Now look in Reish Nun Hey, because we're going to say to Mishnah, that's more complicated. Reish Nun Hey, tell you put Reish Nun Hey up. Right, Reish Nun Hey, it's 3 people. The middle person's got 2 in each direction. So he's able to eat with both the person on the right and the person on the left. But the person on the right and the left can't eat, will never be able to eat with each other.
Well, they can both go
The whole chiddush is only that we're not a choshesh they'll pass. No, they can't eat with each other.
They can go 2 to the middle, and the other guy can go 2, and it's all 3 together.
No, it's not. It's 4 amas. It's 4 amas from the one side. What? It's 4 to the middle. So each one can walk 2. So you can eat Shabbos morning with one on the right and Shabbos afternoon with one on the left. But the one on the right and the left will never be able to eat together. So let's see the Mishnah inside. If there were 2 mixes of Moshe, part of the amas overlap the other. They can eat in the middle, top of them here on base. Actually, it's as long as he doesn't spread his hand out into the other, because it's awesome. If there were 3, the third one is swallowed up between the 2. They're allowed to eat with him. He's allowed to eat with them. They'll never be able to eat with each other. Let's look at picture Reish Nun Vav. If we'll study it for a moment, Reish Nun Vav is a picture of 3 sets of chatzeros. Each one's got an entrance to Rishus Rabbim. If you look very carefully, they each have an entrance between themselves. Had they all made an Eruv chatzeros with each other, so that everyone would be able to carry together, but they didn't. 1 and 2 made a Eruv with each other, and 2 and 3 made Eruv with each other. So we allow 1 and 2 to eat together, and 2 and 3 to eat together, but you cannot have 1 and 3. Now, what's the chiddush again? They didn't make 1 Megillah. If you look actually, Reish Nun Zayin shows you more in detail. What happens is, Reish Nun Zayin is, you've got that the one made an Eruv with that, one made an Eruv with that, but they never made an Eruv with each other. Now, I just want to point out one important halacha. That had they not each had their own entrance to Rishus Rabbim, look back at Reish Nun Vav and say, okay, well, Reish Nun Zayin either. where they showed you clearly in the picture that each one's got his own entrance to Rishus Harabim. Let's say, for example, you close off the first two entrances and only one of them has an entrance. Then the halacha gets much more complicated, because since the only way the chotzer can ever get to Rishus Harabim is by going through somebody else's chotzer, if they never made an eruv with them, then they forbid everybody in the next chotzer from also carrying. For example, if I have a chotzer, let's say inside the road, and you've got a chotzer further out, and the only way for me to get to Rishus Harabim is through your chotzer, and I never made an eruv with your chotzer, let's say it was 3 chatzeros, only 2 and 3 made, but number 1 never did, and number 1 needs to go through 2 and 3, you cannot carry in 2 and 3 either. Because number 1 will say to you, I have a right to go through it because I need to get to Rishus Harabim, and I never made a day with you. That's why the redactic in this picture, I don't know if I can make a picture about this.
Yeah.
They've also got an entrance. Each one has to have his own entrance to Rishus Harabim, that they shouldn't be called Dvisas Regel. Dvisas Regel is right of way. Here, there's no right of way between any of them.
Can you say chotzer is owned by only the houses in it? So why should the guy from one be allowed to?
Right, because everybody has access way to Rishus Harabim.
No, but to go through the other guy's chotzer belongs to him.
But how is this going to get to Rishus Harabim?
Okay, it's a private land. They might make an agreement, but it doesn't belong to.
So we'll get to it another time. That's what I want to. Says the Gemara, Omar b'Shimon, it says the Mishnah, I should say, Omar b'Shimon, and they're open to Rishus Harabim. They're forbidden with each other. And in fact, the Gemara later asks why we need this story. That the logic is not that difficult. But if you look at just the last Rashi on the Mishnah, if they were inside each other, one within each other, and they don't have that none of them will be able to carry at all, because since you do make an eruv with those that have right of way, that's why you have to have each one has his own right to each other. Okay. The Mishnah starts off discussing the machlekes about a sleeping person. What's the din? We had the machlekes of Yehuda Steinberg and the Chachamim. The Chachamim say you only get 4 amos. Yehuda Steinberg says you get 2,000. Now we can understand Yehuda Steinberg who's being made in one of 2 ways. One way to understand him is as follows: that he holds you do not need knowledge, you don't need to have consciousness to be koine shvisa. Shvisa happens automatically. Alternatively, you could say no, you do need consciousness. But the fact is that a person who's sleeping, would he be awake, he would tell you, I want to be koine shvisa. So the fact that he just happens to be unaware does not lack his consciousness. That is a 2 ways to understand. But according to the Chachamim, they obviously hold you need real das. Real das to be koine shvisa. So we've got 2 options understanding Yehuda Steinberg, only one to understand the Chacham. So let's say you've got an ownerless item. You walk in the street and you find a hefker piece of something. And what happens is, let's say, for example, you find water in the stream, which is hefker. And on Yom Tov, you want to take the water. You must remember that Hilchas Tchumen don't just apply to people, they apply to items. Right? More Beitza, big Avichus, later we're going to have it here as well. So what happens like this? What would you say? Hefker, is it koine shvisa or not? What would you say?
What's that for the item?
The item. Is the item koine shvisa? A hefker item, an ownerless item, is a koine shvisa. According to what just say. Right, but explain that. According to the Chachamim that says sleeping person is not koine shvisa, of course, hefker is not koine shvisa.
One way
of Yehuda works, one way not. If you say Yehuda says you need real consciousness, and a sleeping person's got consciousness, it says if he's got consciousness, you say that a hefker thing is not koine shvisa, and a sleeping person is koine shvisa. Why? Because a sleeping person is a lot better than an ownerless item. An ownerless item has no brains whatsoever. So you can never ask him. Say if we can never be koine shvisa. But a sleeping person, he does have das, only happens to be sleeping. But if you say that Yehuda holds that you don't need to have das at all, and you can be koine shvisa without any thinking whatsoever. So also an ownerless item, you can be koine shvisa without thinking. So the Achleikus have got a question in Rabbi Yehuda. Would a hefker item be koine shvisa? According to the Chachamim, it's definitely not koine shvisa. Definitely not koine shvisa. So therefore, it could be according to the Chachamim that if you find something on Shabbos or Yom Tov, you won't be allowed to move it more than 4 hours because could be it's not koine shvisa. Could be. Actually, according to Rabbi Yehuda, we can understand it in 2 different ways. I said, Boy, my kasava Yehuda Misbe kasava does he hold hefker koine shvisa? That hefker koine shvisa because you don't need das. Ubedinu deliflik bekelim. And really, the Mishnah could have said the same argument about an ownerless item. Why did they argue about people? To tell you the chiddush of the chachamim that you're not kohen shvis when you're sleeping. You might have thought that the chachamim won't argue. If you'd only argue about ownerless item, you would have said sleeping people are kohen shvis because at the end of the day they have das if they wake up. But really, the same achleikus would apply to ownerless item as to sleeping people. Why did we choose about sleeping people? To tell us a bigger chiddush of the chachamim that even a sleeping person who really does have a bit of das, if you wake him up, they're not kohen shvisa. Why not? Because you need to have das, and they agrees to the chachamim they need to have das. And maybe the reason why he says you can kohen shvisa when you're sleeping is simply to do with the fact that if you'd be woken up, you'd be kohen shvisa.
Can be woken up.
Oh, so therefore that's exactly the point. Therefore, a
shouldn't
hefker
be
item is not kohen shvisa. That's the shaila vova. Exactly, that's the shaila vova. Do we say that Yehuda holds that the ownerless item is kohen shvisa, but a sleeping and just like a sleeping person, or do we say no? An ownerless item is not kohen shvisa. Only a sleeping person because you can wake him up. Rain that fell on Erev Yom Tov. They get 2,000 amos in each direction. Why they get 2,000 amos? Yeah. It clearly says, very good, that it's Kodesh Shvisa. And it says not only the Kodesh Shvisa, that even an ownerless item is Kodesh Shvisa. Maybe it's going to be Shittas Chachamim. No.
It only came during Yom Tov.
No, this was Erev Yom Tov. It's Erev Yom Tov, the first case. Oh, Kalachim bad person. I was tricking you. The Vaisa says that if rain comes on Erev Yom Tov, it gets 2,000 amos. According to the Chachamim, of course it can't get anything because they hold even a sleeping person doesn't get anything. Rain. But it says that rain does finish this. Must be Yom Tov. It falls on Yom Tov. Anybody who acquires it gets the right to decide how far you can move it. Hello, they're not it's nobody. This bias it doesn't fit in the corner to anybody because at the end of the day it's not Shvisa. Nobody holds Shvisa. So there's a vaya that it must be that Bichnui holds ownerless item of Shvisa. Yosef Abai become a lot of Shmaitz Abai said over this proof that ownerless item of Shvisa. How do you know to our ownerless item? Maybe we'll talk about rain, which is right next to the village. And everybody in the village is thinking to themselves, well, it's going to rain soon. We want to acquire it. So therefore, from Erev Yom Tov, it belongs to them. No, that answer is no good. Right? What he really does is it brings another question, and that question cannot be answered, and therefore you say this Thursday. There's that. A person who owns a well, let's say you have a well in your garden, it belongs to that person. So if you make an Eruv, and I come to you on Shabbos, and I say to you, can I have a cup of water? And you've gone and made an Eruv to the south of Manchester, I will not be allowed to take the cup of water that you gave me on Yom Tov to the north of Manchester. Not bad if you go well. In any tap. I ask you for a biscuit. You give me a biscuit on Yom Tov afternoon. I cannot take it out of the Itchum where you would be allowed to go. Because when Yom Tov came in, the biscuit was yours. And therefore it was kind of shvisa like you. And therefore if you were to the Itchum, the only way you're allowed to go. We should also hit, if let's say water belongs to the entire city, like the city people. We should only bubble if there's a lot of people traveling. It goes according to every individual person who fills it up. Because when he's kind it becomes his. But Tanya Boy Shvatim, which is exactly the same as the bubble, a boy which belongs to everybody. There it doesn't say like the person who gathers it, but rather he gets 2,000 amos. So we see that Bircha Benuri hold the Hefke Okrina Shvisa. And a sleepy person is Kina Shvisa, not because if he would be woken up, he would have das. He holds you don't need to have das to be Kina Shvisa. What? Oh no, water the same. You'd be Kina Shvisa on Erev Yom Tov, except that one vice is going.
How do we answer the Gemara's reason that maybe water is different to the das of the person?
No, because that we're saying that's the two vices is a stira. One vice is going to go to the Bircha, one's going to go into the Rabban. The vice goes according to the Rabban, and they say Chef Sefka is not Kina Shvisa, so it's only Kina Shvisa according to the person who fills it up on Yom Tov. That's right. That's going to go to the Rabban. And the Bircha says no, it happens according to the item itself. Now, So let's go very, very briefly what happened. What happened was like this. Rav asked the question, what's the Sovich Menui? We brought a raya that is Kona Shvisa. We said that maybe it's Kona Shvisa only because the people of the town thought about it. Well, says, no, we've got another kasha. And therefore you have to come on to the conclusion of Yehuda Menui holds is Kona Shvisa. But one, I guess, let's go into the details of it. When Abaye came to Rabbi Yosef, he told Rabbi Yosef his Rebbe, Rav Safa asked me this question. This is what I replied. He said to me, I don't understand you. Why didn't you reply to Rav Safa? Rav Safa said that maybe we're talking about rain that falls near the town, and everyone in the town believes the rain is theirs, and it's not ownerless. Why didn't you answer that it's clearly not true from the words of the Bais himself? If we're talking about rain which is next to the city, it says that rain that falls on Erev Yom Tov gets 2,000 amos. But water that belongs to the city, how far distance they get? Like the people of the city, it doesn't use the same expression. They get 2,000 amos. Evidently, the Bryce is not talking about rain that belongs to the city. It's talking about ownerless rain. The Bryce says like this: rain that falls on Erev Yom Tov gets 2,000 amos. Is a raya that's Kona Shvisa. Said to Safa, how do you know it's Kona Shvisa ownerless items? Maybe the people in the town had asked to be Kona of it. Said to Rabbi Yosef, I don't understand. You should reply to him straight away. That's not true. Because if that would be the case, the Brisa does not need to say they get 2,000 amos. The Brisa should stick to the same language that it used before regarding a well that belongs to the city, that the halacha is it goes according to the people of the city. Similarly, the rain of the city should go according to the people of the city. Elamai, we're talking about a new story where it's normal rain, doesn't belong to the city, and it's Kona Shvisa. And that's how we pass it. That an ownerless item is Kona Shvisa. Says the Gemara, if rain comes down on Yom Tov, so if rain comes on Yom Tov and you take a cup of rain, how far can you take it? As far as your Eiruvin is, not according to the halachas of what it was on Friday, or when Yom Tov came in, but rather according to your own halachas. So if you made an Erev Tchumen to the north, you can take it to the north. If you didn't, you can't take it. And let's say you fill up the rain and pass it on to me, what would the halacha be? No. It's like the first person to gather it. Yeah, that's a very long Tosfos. Not very long. That's the second Tosfos. The one who gets it first. Favorite Gemara, what's going on? Where was the rain when Yom Tov came in? In the sea. And therefore you could have shvis in the sea. Frank Tosfos, I don't know how you could have shvis in the sea. Where the machlik is whether yesh tchumin l'mala ma'asor, yesh tchumin l'mala ma'asor. And for Tosfos, that one big body of water, since it's sitting on the seabed, so we consider it like it's on the floor. It's not like a boat which is raised above the floor. Water, we had it once, Gabi Akira Nocha. The water is on, bowl floating in the water, dropping something on water is considered Anocha. But dropping on a bowl on water is not an Anocha. So it doesn't matter how deep it is. Failing more, but my like the Shvisa Bukiyainis, the sea Shvisa. Limit the Luka Abeleza, Dika Bleza, Makulim, Kulim Mekanis to show. So the Gemara says, Abeleza tells us rain comes from the sea. It can't be like Abeleza because if it comes from the sea, then you should be shvis in the sea, and then you can't carry your water.
It's in the sky.
Omar Yitzchak. Let's I want to go do attack. Omar Yitzchak. We're talking about clouds that already on every Yom Tov you could see the raindrops inside them. Maybe those clouds went away and there's new clouds. How do you know that the rain that you're looking at is the rain which is thing? So it says the kasha, even if it would be from that rain. Okay, we'll see. No, that's how the Gemara asks that. That's a different question. One at a time. So the Gemara says, how do you know it's the same clouds? You recognize the rain. It actually says that clouds have a certain shape, and you see the rain coming from a specific cloud. It's a suffix to our bottom, whether it came from the clouds that you saw on Friday, or it's the clouds from this, different clouds. Is because it's shvisa in the clouds. And therefore, you should again, Tiv should be not in Tchumin Mal Ma'asor. Yesh Tchumin Niklik Shvis above it. Says more Lo Lamei Malach Yesh Tchumin. There is Tchumin, and therefore it is awesome. Umaya Be'eva Mivle Bli. That what happens is the water does not exist, and there's a separate entity that's Rikona Shvisa. It's not a separate entity. Since it's not a separate entity, it can't be Rikona Shvisa. You can only Rikona Shvisa when it exists. When Yom Tov came in, it didn't exist. If that's the case, it's Noilad. And Noilad is Muktzah, the Asiri. And this is a more different answer. The cloud is constantly moving, and it's not going to shvisa anywhere. That's my question from the sea. They're always moving. Springs that are constantly flowing. It's like every human being. Okay, here we're going to stop and ask all the questions now. Just get clear what we've said. The more is like this: rain that comes on Friday, and nobody's yet acquired it. What is the halacha?
It's like any person when water's flowing.
The rain that fell on Friday. That's 2,000 amos. Very good. According to who? Of Yechid Menur, which we pass on. According to the Chachamim, how far would you be allowed to rain that fell on Friday? Only 4 amos. We don't pass. Regarding rain that falls on Yom Tov, according to your Eiruvin, the Gemara, why is not kind of shvisa in the sea or in the clouds? The Gemara Maskana says because it's moving. Moving things are not kind of shvisa. So therefore, if rain falls on Yom Tov, you can take the rain as far as you, and it always goes according to the first person who acquires it. Okay. This asks a few questions. Says as a kasha that we have a halacha that suffix to Abon Kula only works when it's not Davish Matir, and here's Davish Matir. So Teresa says that we see that Ruvet Chumin were even more maker, that even though it's Davish Matir, okay. Okay, 5 lines from the top. Okay. I want to get to the end of the sugya thing. Any
Yeah, I'm trying.
I don't mind. The question is, will we always still be a daf ahead? What's the point?
Yeah, we can always say it for time when we're honest. So we'll keep a daf ahead. It's always good to be safe.
What do you prefer, to be a daf ahead or not?
Yeah,
Like have-
stick a daf ahead. Be on the safe
I
side.
mean, you feel bad that on Yom Kippur there should be no shiur.
Soccer
Yeah,
building.
people do have a lot.
Soccer building.
We get 6 or 7, then it's worth doing. Less than
So I am flexible.
Have you stopped the thing?
No, I haven't. Sorry.
it's 7:30. That's finished. The half.